I just received my first mail haul directly from a publisher. I got a package, and in this package, I received 4 New York Review of Book classic releases that are coming out in the next couple months. I have 2 that are releasing in June, and then 2 coming out in July. This is a direct effect of how lucky I've been with this channel in terms of the reach of many of my videos. They've gone farther out than I likely deserve, and it's led to publishers actually caring about sending me some of their upcoming releases so that I can showcase them on this channel. Now, the publisher, New York Review of Books Classics, is a very fitting one for the kind of material that I like to cover on this channel. They tend to release older works, perhaps forgotten great works, that are newly translated very often for a general public. It is curated by editors, and the assumption is that you're going to trust the taste of those editors to match your own. I have quite a few New York Review of Book Classics behind me. You can see the matte finish of their spines in the bookshelf of the background. With these first 4 books that I received, you'll notice that they're quite slim. In fact, the first one is only about 100 pages, and I want to talk about this one in a little bit more detail than the other 3, because as soon as I got this, I saw that it was only about 100 pages, and it seemed to me reasonable to just read it right there on the spot. So I read the whole thing, and I gotta say it was worthwhile to actually read through this instead of just go off of the synopsis in the back, because just based on the summary of what this book, The Singularity, is about, it would seem like a mere science fiction tale relating to consciousness in a machine, the kind of story that we're familiar with something like 2001, A Space Odyssey, or, for instance, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, the short story by Harlan Ellison. And in these sorts of tales, you have an AI construct exceeding the bounds of human consciousness in order to outsmart humanity, and humans must resist that pushing down in the hierarchy of power and authority in life. And it's that resistance that becomes the central tension at the core of these thrilling science fiction stories. But in this one, in The Singularity, we have a story about AI that is really not about AI significantly. It's more about what AI indicates about human nature, the ways that in being a simulacrum of human behavior, it is only a mimicry of human behavior. And to attempt to clone one's consciousness or a mind into the form of machinery is to lose something quite fundamental and difficult to pin down. This story is written in such an unexpected fashion. When I think of science fiction, I think of sometimes esoteric, often dense scientific concepts in order to almost teach or philosophically question at the same time as tell a story. But what we have in here is a lot more humor throughout the book. I found the tone of The Singularity playful, as if it were a Wes Anderson film, where every character is speaking for the enjoyment and pleasure of the viewer, as opposed to necessarily being true to themselves as complex characters. What we have here is a protagonist, or seeming protagonist, in the character of Ormano Ismani, a university professor who's called down to the Ministry of Defense in order to work on a mysterious government project that he doesn't know anything about. There's this initial mystery in the early portion of the story that doesn't actually drive the narrative forward, because the book reveals very early that it's going to be an artificial intelligence at the center of this building. But what that mystery instead drives is a kind of mockery of the confusion of the main character and the ways that he is a highly insecure figure, a highly awkward main character. And this is perfectly illustrated in contrast to his wife, who is rather cunning and witty and playful. She's constantly toying with the characters around her in such a way that there's just an ongoing joke going on in this book where the main character is such a lame figure and his wife is such a impressive, intelligent figure. And it's this kind of winding between the two that makes for so much of the fun in the first half of the book. And it actually is that playfulness with character, with insecurities in characters, that makes this book so much more than just a little sci-fi story about artificial intelligence. And instead, it just becomes almost little vignettes, little moments of fun on the way up to this Ministry of Defense building. As I was saying, Eliza Ismani went on, I said that if it's not the atom bomb, what do they do in this place we're going to? And why won't they tell us? Even if it were a military secret, it seems to me, rather than going there in person, you referred to an atomic plant. Not referred to, I was only asking. Well, ma'am, Captain Vestros said, his answer strained. I think you will have to be patient until you get there. I assure you that I am not in a position to tell you. But you know, don't you? I told you, ma'am, I have never been there. But you know what it is they do there, don't you? Ismani listened nervously. Look, ma'am, and forgive me for being pedantic, there are 3 possibilities. Either it isn't a secret, but I don't know what it is, or I know but it's a secret, or it's a secret and on top of that I don't know what it is. You see that in any case, but, Eliza objected, you can tell us which of the 3 cases it is. The second, the officer countered, depending on the level of secrecy. If it were classified top secret, as is often the case in operational plans, for example, it would even extend, and the rule expressly prescribes it, to everything that concerns it, even remotely and partially, even indirectly and negatively. And what does negatively mean? It means that if someone knows that there is such a secret but doesn't know what it is, he is even forbidden to reveal that he doesn't know it. And note, ma'am, that though the restriction is seemingly absurd, it has its good reasons. Take our case, for instance, Military Zone 36. Well then, simply admitting that I am not informed, given my rank and functions, might provide a clue, albeit minimal, to someone who... But you know who we are, Mrs. Ismani exclaimed, irritably. The very fact that you're taking us there excludes, I would say, any possibility of suspicion. About 5 minutes went by. Then Ismani timidly spoke up. Forgive me, Captain. You said there were 3 possibilities? Actually, there are 4, because it might also be that the matter is not secret and that you know what it is. I didn't propose that case, Vestro explained, because it seems superfluous. Superfluous? That's right. In that case, if that were the case, I would have told you everything a long time ago. Watch it, Moira! But the warning to the driver was also superfluous. The curve they were approaching was very gentle, and the car wasn't doing more than 35. What you find in the first half of the book is that you really are just traveling to the Ministry of Defense, and it doesn't actually get to the sci-fi artificial intelligence stuff until the second half. But by that point, wherein you reach that artificial intelligence construct, it does shift tonally away from the humor into far more of deeper questions, into the nature of copying a human mind and the limits of copying merely the information of a mind, what it would mean to have a artificial construct that mimics all of the connections of our neurons. Is that enough to make for a consciousness, or are we more adhered to our bodies than it otherwise seems? It's one of those things that is fairly topical nowadays, considering how much AI is at the forefront of our thinking with these chatbots that try so hard to mimic human behavior, but really what they mimic is a kind of probabilistic outcome of patterns in human speech, and it's just following those patterns enough to create the illusion of mimicking something internal beneath those patterns. For a book that was originally published in the 1960s, this one does a pretty fitting job of really pushing on that question of, would it be enough for a machine to merely mimic the patterns of our speech and our behavior, or can we infer from that something deeper underneath? I think it actually addresses that question fairly pointedly and attempts to give a real answer at bottom, but I'll let you read the book yourself to kind of see where it leans in that direction. One thing that makes this topic especially relevant nowadays, on top of the ChatGPT fixations that we currently have, is there's this general idea of, is the brain enough to contain something like a consciousness? If you made a machine that mimicked the elaborate web of our neurons in a brain, is that enough for consciousness? Or is that elaborate web in the brain merely one step along consciousness down the spine to every other aspect of our bodies? Do we require the combination of a body with brain in order for the kind of consciousness we have to arise? Do we require a long tail of evolutionary history and specifically natural selection and the various desires that that brings up for the same such desires to emerge in an AI construct? Would it be false to instill those same patterns onto something without that extension of history behind it? Do we lose something without that natural selection history that is within human and other animal bodies? Or is it enough to just mimic the effects of that history? What bridges that gap? That is sort of the central question between simulacrum and what is simulated. And this book tackles it in a very slim way, but through the humor and balanced with the more serious questions, it ends up being a satisfying journey nonetheless. I found it compelling the whole way through, far funnier than I expected. I think the humor really elevates it past what we would typically expect in a science fiction story. It gives it a more distinctive voice than it otherwise would have. There are plenty of artificial intelligence stories, and it's nice to have one that really tries to toy with the human way before it begins to toy with the constructed intelligence of a machine. And that is The Singularity by Dino Buzzati. The next book that arrived and also releasing in June is The Lily in the Valley by Honoré de Balzac. This is of a more realist bent in that Honoré de Balzac is one of the founders of realism in fiction. And all you need to know about realism is it's a style of writing that focuses in on specificity in the details. It's almost, you could think of it like a pointillist way of writing fiction where you focus in on so many high resolution details and it is the reader zooming back out and capturing the whole that makes for the fullness of the story. And it's this feeling of realisticness as if it's grounded in reality. This book, The Lily in the Valley, seems to especially focus on the tensions in relationships, especially ones with an age gap and perhaps a maturity gap between one partner and the other, and the ways in which temptation can tug us along and we can kind of play with our temptations while also perhaps playing with the heartstrings of another. This book follows a young man who experiences a small sensual tryst with a married woman, and then over the years continuously plays with the temptations of that tryst and potential bond with her without, as far as I understand, fully fulfilling it completely. It's a kind of constant teasing out of what could be in their relationship until at some point he falls in love with a woman closer to his age. And as you can imagine, all sorts of complexities and inner and outer turmoil commence. And it's one of those stories that sounds particularly enticing both for its sensual play, but also in its psychological twisting of affairs and expectations and addiction to the ebb and flow of potentiality in a relationship as opposed to actual commitment and responsibility of a relationship. So that is The Lily in the Valley by Honoré de Balzac, coming out in June. Then we have another book releasing in July that seems to bend toward being a memoir, but of a singular pivotal moment in one's life, and that is Mourning Abreast by the Chinese author Xixi. And this book seems to be about a woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer and the eventual mastectomy that she experiences. But it is more about the confusion and dissociation that begins to occur as your body betrays you and those around you begin to prod you as a kind of object for medical research and curiosity. And is that prodding, it is that confusion that seems to be inspiring the format of the story. In my glancing through this book, there seems to be a kind of playfulness with language, displaying the various ways that doctors can present one's illness, and also the varying ways in which you can be treated by different types of people in the medical industry, and the ways that your life begins to become overturned as your body has decided to upend its obligations to you. And it's this shifting in time that seems to be the focus of this memoir, alongside a great deal of balanced humor in the midst of the tragedy of going through a mastectomy and what that must be like. It's an odd book. Every bit of it that I've glanced at has felt very personable, very down to ground. It doesn't seem to me to be striving to be sentimental for its own sake. It's rather trying to be honest about the strangeness of being told that you have an illness that could kill you and that you suddenly have to lose a part of yourself in the process. It seems focused on the very human and strange ways that we deal with such harrowing news. And for that, it seems unique and one that I'm excited to actually get to at some point. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. With light, there was day and night on earth. With light, plants could carry out photosynthesis and produce food. With plants, herbivores had sustenance for survival, and thus humans proliferated on earth. With light, people could see things. When the sun went down, people sought out various light sources, darting fireflies, glowing phosphorus, and burning oil. Gradually, there were electric lights. Light allows us to see. We are always looking, observing everything around us, looking at things near and far, but there are so many things in the world, big, small, far away, concealed, deeply hidden, and ubiquitous, that we can't see with our naked eyes, so we create telescopes, microscopes, cameras, scanners, and other eyes, humanity's third kind of eye. In hospitals, people use a variety of technological eyes to observe the cosmos below the skin. I appreciate the fact that it isn't a straightforward narrative like most would be about this kind of a subject. It doesn't sentimentalize or moralize too much about cancer and what it feels like. It rather is just trying to communicate the human response to such a treatment. And that is Morning Abreast by Shishi. And then finally, coming out in July, we have a series of ancient Indian tales. This is The Oceans of Cruelty. In this case, translated by Douglas J. Pennick. This sounds very much like a nested series of narratives, much like the struggles of Scheherazade in 1001 Nights, wherein each story is within a broader frame tale of needing to tell a story in order to survive. However, the creature attempting to survive is one long dead. So this tells a story of a king who is cursed by a sorcerer who tasks him with getting a corpse spirit. So this is a spirit long dead in a graveyard, and it seems to be these corpse spirits hang from trees and must be plucked like fruit. And so this king goes to capture this corpse spirit, but once he plucks it from the tree and places it on his back, the corpse spirit then begins to tell him a story. And each story that the corpse spirit tells him is a riddle in itself. And by the end, the king is tasked with answering honestly the question at the center of the story. And if the king knows the answer, he has to tell the truth and state the answer he knows. And every time he knows an answer, the corpse spirit is thrust back into the tree. And so again and again, each story is a riddle that the king must solve. And because the king continuously solves the stories, each new story emerges again. I think most of these types of nested narratives would actually be the opposite, in the sense that they would expect the protagonist to need to answer the story in order to succeed, and really it's his failure to know the answer that is the problem. However, in this story, it seems that the failure is knowing the answer, and the success would be ignorance. And perhaps it's teasing out the notion of allowing for your own ignorance to guide you to a certain extent. Sometimes our answers can get ahead of ourselves and actually be limiting on our journey, and sometimes embracing ambiguity is truly the way forward. As has been told, primordial space, the undivided, the signless, where sentience and non-sentience, awareness and unawareness have not divided, where there is neither life nor death, nor time nor stasis, continuity or discontinuity, void or phenomena. Primordial sea undivided, primordial sky undivided, primordial darkness undivided, primordial light undivided, chaos moving and alive, without reference to order or disorder, neither noun nor verb, continuity continuing in its own reference, a vast and empty, luminous expanse. Sounds, words emerge, undivided from the original sea, never separated nor born. Phenomena rippling on the surface of the sea, rippling as great forces, gods, cycles of time wherein worlds and universes are born, evolve, decay, die, and dissolve. Whispers pass by, not remembered nor forgotten. So that is The Oceans of Cruelty, Ancient Indian Stories. So those are 4 upcoming NYRB classics. I hope those are interesting to you. I'm going to continue to reach out to some publishers now that my channel's gotten big enough, but let me know what publishers you would be interested in hearing upcoming releases about. Maybe I'll make it a regular thing on this channel. It'll be my own kind of mail haul where every time I receive books from publishers, I can showcase them to you on this channel. And I hope these books seem interesting to you. I put all the titles down in the description so you can check it out yourself. Thanks for watching. I hope these were interesting to you.